I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of Electric, as well as the co-founder of Scaleless. And today I'm talking with Elizabeth Greene, who's the co-founder at Jungler, which is an Amazon agency that drives exponential sales growth for sellers using client-centric ad strategies. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on.
So before we dive into things here, can you give everybody just a quick background on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My story is a little bit interesting. Hopefully it will be encouraging to your listeners. I don't have a really huge background in business or growing businesses. So I'm very much scrappy, try things and, try and see where it can go. Which I was listening to some of your past podcasts and like listening to your guests' origin stories. I'm like, oh my gosh, they've done so much. It's amazing. Before I got into this, I was actually a stay-at-home mom. We have 6 kids, so that kept me busy enough. Add on homeschooling of those kids on top of that. There's plenty to keep me busy with. But my husband's family is very entrepreneurial. So I do definitely have a support system behind me to sort of push me into what I'm doing now. I would have never thought that I would be growing a business, growing the team, agency dynamic. Like there's a lot of really, really exciting things that I found very, very fulfilling. But yeah, so started up with that. It was like everybody does. Hey, how can we have a business where we can work from home? Right? I was at home, the kids were home, my husband was not. So like, how can everybody be home? There's lots of avenues for that, especially nowadays. Like the options are almost infinite, which kind of makes it a little bit daunting at times. So a lot of things, they're just selling on Etsy, selling physical products. Of course, Amazon being one of those avenues to sell physical products. So that's what we started to get into. Retail arbitrage, which that was a little bit much. Like it's still a viable business. There are still some amazing people doing really great numbers using that model, which is essentially go to stores, purchase items for less, sell it for more on Amazon, right? It fulfills the service because anyone looking to source, they're looking to purchase it. They don't want to have to go to the store. You're kind of the go-between for that, getting those physical products on Amazon. It's a lot. You got to go to stores, you got to find the products, you got to scan everything, you got to make sure, the margins are there to do that. Dragging along, I think 4 kids at the time was a little bit much to do that. And so like, okay, is there another model? There is another model that's called private label. And those, a lot of the sellers we work with now are private label sellers, which is you essentially develop a product. So it's a little bit more expensive than say just white labeling. So white labeling is like you find a product, you slap your logo on it and you're off to the races, right? Private labeling, I mean, if you really had to put a distinction there, it's more like developing your own products to be able to sell on the platform. So it's a little bit more that goes into it. You should get to know your customers a little bit more. What does the market need? Where are the gaps in the market? That sort of analysis. And so got into that and then promptly got pregnant with twins. And that was a whole beast in of itself. I think I lost about a year of my life and we survived, but obviously things had to be prioritized and selling on Amazon was not one of them. So when we finally picked our heads out of the sand, pregnancy plus however much, probably until the boys were about 4 months old, was when we started to see the end of survival mode a little bit. So after picking our heads out of the sand, I was like, all right, well, let's get back on the, trying to really develop a business to be where we could, something we could do online that was flexible. And then Amazon seller communities, I was in a lot of those. So I started to enter into that a little bit more, having more conversations. And part of those conversations was all around advertising. How does one do advertising? What is the most effective way to do advertising? There's some really interesting connections in advertising between your advertising efforts and then your organic market share. There's a direct correlation between those two things. So running ads is not just great for obviously whatever ad sales and ROI you get from that, but there's residual effects of it, which makes it a very, very attractive thing to have. But it's also something, if you don't know how to run it properly, you can like any advertising, right? You could completely blow all of your profits and go out of business. So there's a tightrope to walk, and it's much more complex these days. So those conversations started happening, and people were like, I don't know how to do this. You obviously do. And I was like, I guess I do. And so started helping out some sellers, and it's been, I guess, going on 7 years now and growing ever since.
I mean, frankly, raising and homeschooling 6 kids sounds far more difficult than running a business. So this should be easy for you.
One would think. I've learned a lot. I've definitely learned a lot.
How'd you end up? You mentioned that there's a bunch of different options out there when it comes to, being able to work from home. How did you even settle upon Amazon to begin with?
This was back. I'm not even gonna say the year because I'm gonna totally get my timelines wrong. But this was Amazon was and still continues to be a really great online arbitrage platform. A benefit of
Mm,
selling on Amazon is Amazon, the business, has solved a lot of the logistics problems and the traffic problems that historically are a little bit harder if you want to get up on selling on any sort of e-com channel. Because like you said, there's tons of different options, right? I mean, you can sell through Instagram, there's TikTok shops now, people have Shopify stores, you can run traffic. But with all of those things, you have to figure out the logistics, you have to figure out the transaction, you have to make sure that you actually have traffic coming to those platforms and that the traffic converts. There's a lot of variables within that if you are completely new to it and you don't know how to solve it, there's less variables when it comes to the Amazon platform, right? So there's a lot of competition, but Amazon has standardized the listings. So yes, there's absolutely things that must be done to optimize for conversion rates when like when you list a product, but the box you can play in is more defined. So it's a little bit less daunting than say like completely setting up a Shopify store if you are starting from square one. So there's a lot of things that make it really attractive to somebody who's looking to get into selling on ecom but doesn't even know where to start. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot to learn. Like it's still really complex. It's not like nothing's like super easy, but there's a lot of probably problems and things that are solved for you. Like so just in terms of like customer support, in a lot of ways that's completely handled, right? Again, the trade-off is you're playing within their sandbox, and so there's only
yeah.
so much you can do. But again, due to you can run a really really large business with a really really small team, just leveraging the platform.
Are you doing FBA for all of your products?
We were so we've transitioned to now we just have our agency, mostly because that's growing and scaling, and I like personally being able to focus on one specific thing. That's been really helpful for me as a founder. I know people are like, I have 20 different businesses and 7 different sources of income, and like that's amazing, and I applaud you for that. I just know myself, and I know I struggle to really achieve, I don't say perfection because honestly nothing's ever perfect, but like achieve the quality that I want when my focus is so split.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. Plus, when it comes to an agency, I found that the ones that are more successful are the ones that sort of hone in and focus on doing one thing exceptionally
Mm,
well, versus doing everything, sort of,
yeah.
mediocre. Especially when it comes to being able to scale and build out the team. It's a lot
Hmm.
easier if you're only scaling and building out one function versus trying to scale and build out a bunch of
Yeah.
different functions all at once.
Yeah.
Speaking
That's
of
what I found.
scaling the team, how have you gone about in a remote environment, adding on to your team and building out like processes so that everybody can work, cross functionally together and well with the clients that you are onboarding?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And like I mentioned in the intro, this is my first rodeo. So I'll tell you how I've done it. and then talk to me in 5 years and be like, oh, that was terrible. I would have done it this way. But how I've done it is replacing things that I've learned how to do. And also placing the things that are the easiest to get someone to be able to take over. So, for example, my first hire with advertising, you're looking at a ton of different data and reports, right? It's pulling this report, it's pulling that report, it's putting things together. You can create systems to like combine things. Eventually you get software and you level up, but it's still a lot of pulling reports, right? And those things are manual, they're tedious, and they don't require a lot of creative thinking. And so for that, that was my first hire. I was like, oh my gosh, I absolutely hate putting together these reports. Somebody come here and like put together these reports. And that person is still with me, and she's amazing. And it's also finding the person that enjoys and can function well in that role. So for example, her name is Crystal. She has been pulling reports and putting them in folders and following a system for like I said, I'm going on 7 years. I think she's been with me like 5-6 years at this point. Like, that's a long dang time to be doing almost the same exact thing for like day. But she thrives in it, and she's taken on stuff. And there's times that I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. And she's like, no, I got it. I know this is what we do every month. Don't worry. Like, I know the system. I know it. And she just runs it. She's amazing, right? I would absolutely hate my life. I would quit within the first month. That would drive me up a wall, right? So it's finding those people. They're like, okay, this is the thing that I need. And I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of people who are much farther along in business than me. And one piece of advice, which I have found has been true, is it is really difficult when you have someone like a founder or maybe somebody in leadership, when you're trying to like say replace them or take things off their plate, to expect that you're going to get the one person who's going to do the 20 different things that they're doing. Because like you said, it is very hard to have excellence in multiple areas. You can over time, but it's hard to find like that exact puzzle piece that you're going to fit into that. And so what I have found for myself is it's what are the pieces that I can carve off. So for example, for me, we put out a lot of content, right? I have done this with, I hired a content editor. She's amazing. She got super swamped. We're putting out a lot of shorts. And so so instead of me like trying to be like, okay, how do we replace her? It's like, oh, this is the piece that we actually is the most helpful to carve off of this. Let's get somebody who all he does is edit shorts. That's all he does. His entire job, right? Edit shorts. We've gotten better at them. They've gotten faster. The clips are getting better. Great. Okay. Now she's like, I'm struggling a little bit with writing the captions, the content. Great. Let's look at somebody who can be the content writer, right? Let's pull off these pieces. So I think it's the same thing as that founder. You're like, hey, how can I section the work into areas of expertise and then find the person to fulfill that role? And if you're fulfilling, like if you're trying to take off your shoulders something, it might require multiple people. So for example, I took off the pulling of reports, right? Well, then I needed more back-end work. There's a little bit more of, I need some innovative work, but not too much. It's kind of like make some strategic decisions here, and here, but overall you follow a process, and there's a couple of branches of if formulas or something. And so, okay, let me put somebody in that role, and then I come up, I'm still over communications, and I'm still over this. Okay, now communications is different than somebody doing the back end work, and then, you just kind of plug the holes, and then eventually you're out of it. It takes a lot longer, but what I found is that you can control the quality a lot more. Again, talk to me in 5 years, I'll be like, that was dumb. But right now, that's what's working.
I mean, agencies are notorious for turnover, though. So how have you been able to keep somebody for 5-6 years, when most agencies I know, if you've been there for 2 or more years, that's like a huge positive, because I've seen a lot of 6-9 month stints and people hop from place to place. So is it more on the hiring side, you're finding the right people, or have you set up structures internally where people are incentivized to stay? talk me through that a little bit, because again, like agencies are typically a pretty high turnover
Yeah,
business from an employee standpoint.
that is a really, really good question. And maybe I'll try and talk through the answer. Because to be honest, I do have very good retention rates on the team. The only reason I have ever had anyone leave me is because they weren't a good fit and we let them go. As of right now, I don't have anyone who is left. Also, for context, a lot of my team is overseas, and I found a lot of talent in the Philippines. So a lot of my team is in the Philippines, and they do also have a somewhat client-facing role as well. So it's not like, oh, we have the back end team and then we have, and that might be part of it, right? I don't treat them as like you're the back end workers that are secretly doing all the work in the closet and like nobody's supposed to know about you because it's a secret. Like I do try and applaud them and celebrate them when I see them doing something really good. I also try and be sensitive and just genuinely care about the team. Um, an example of that might be also I try and have frank discussions of, hey, this is where I see something that I think you would excel at. Um, is this a role that you would be interested in? So I have one of, say, my top ad managers. She has really, really good communication skills, and actually, she also has like a background in like management of like customer relations teams at some like very large companies. So she really has that communication aspect, and she's wicked good at it. I had a frank discussion with her. I said, "Hey, like I feel like you would be phenomenal in this role. Is this something that would be of interest to you?" And she's like, honestly, uh I would probably quit and hate my life because I don't like, she's like, I just want to be like doing my thing. I love working in the accounts. I love like being in this thing, getting to like figure all this stuff out, and it drives me up a wall when I have to like just, she's like, I just know. I'm like, that's good to know. Great. So I'm not gonna force you into that role. You might have skills there that might, so it's like trying to genuinely take interest in where would you be the most happy, where do your skill sets best fit, and then where can I make sure that you're going to feel fulfilled in your work and also feel appreciated on what you do.
Yeah, I had a team member early on that I moved into a role because they were a great like individual contributor, and so sort of the logical next step would be manager. But they were a terrible manager, and they didn't even want to be a manager. But I just never had that conversation with them around if they did or did not want to be a manager. But to your point about having an overseas team, how have you managed being able to sort of like source and vet quality, and then also have them be client facing? Because I know, I have other agency owners who have had difficulties, especially with the client facing component of it.
Mm-hmm. So I think you can have the head or the front client facing role to be an overseas.
Mm-hmm.
I will say it's a little bit harder. You can find the talent to be able to do that. Time differences make that a little bit harder. So most of our clients are in the US, right? That can be a little bit difficult. So that current role is onshore. So they're located where I'm located. And so we have sort of like the front runner, and then there's sort of like management underneath that. I did for a time because that was one huge thing to offload. I was very much stuck in the client communication role, like facilitating. It's very easy to hand off a lot of the written communications to them.
Mm-hmm.
Other things I would say is vet for the type of worker that you want to have long term. That is something that I ended up having to let someone go who honestly was good at account management, the doing of the work. And I did my best. Actually, I was able to find him a position, where he didn't have to go down in salary, and really advocate for him, because I thought he had grown underneath me And, he had definitely up-leveled his skills for sure. But unfortunately, where I was needing the team to go in terms of having them take over some of the communications from my plate, there was just a disconnect there, and his skill set wasn't quite there, and I wasn't seeing him push to learn that skill set. And so, because in the beginning, I was like, oh, yeah, no, I'm over communications. I just need people to do the work, not thinking, shoot, as the agency grows, if every single communication goes through me and I'm responsible for every single client interaction, what is that going to look like in 6 months? At some point, I can't even get past that, right? So then I thought, well, what pieces can I hand off? What does that look like? And so if I'm vetting for, say, an account management role, I just need to know, can you do the work? Are you skilled? Right.
Right.
But if I'm vetting, so I might not do things like, do we do like, video interviews? There are some people who are like, hey, if it's a back-end person, I don't even need to do it. I just need, I need examples of work, and I need, just to be assured of that, right? Versus, or I don't have to worry so much about, can you be on camera? Do you have good like spoken English, right? It doesn't really matter to me. Well, 6 months it might matter. So I would say, like, think long term about what you feel like maybe some of the things that you feel like the role could move into, and just make sure that you're pre-vetting for that. Something that I had learned, now I'm starting to go on. And then as far as, I think it also is a determination of how you as a founder want to build your team. Again, talk to me in 5 years and they're like, that was a terrible idea. I don't know. I just know what I've done. And I've learned a lot about myself through growing the agency. And I've learned that I personally suck at following SOPs. I'll be honest. Mm-hmm. I'm not an over systematized type of person. Mm-hmm. And so therefore I also suck at writing SOPs. So what I've done is I've brought in other team members who can basically come in and simplify my complexity. Because I work in the future, I work in the what is possible, and I also work in to the utmost possible excellence we can. That is what we must deliver. And so that means I'm constantly like, here's a better way, here's a better way, here's a better way, here's a better way. And I'm living in the future, and I'm like, I'm always thinking of the possibilities. So it's really hard for me to sit down and write down the now. Which means I have to get people who are comfortable working within that. Somebody else, that might sound absolutely horrible, and they're like, I need everything systematized. I need to make sure every single person checks every single, like it's like to the T. Absolutely. I like being able to have some form of creativity, and I think it's also important in the industry we're in with the advertising. And consequently, I've been able to find people because I know what I want, and I know what I'm looking for, and I know what that skill set looks for. My overseas team is developing ad strategies that I'm like, I feel like I know what I'm doing, right? Like, I've done this for a really long time. I can get on podcasts, I can talk shop all day long. But I look at what they're doing and I'm like, how the heck did you get those results? Like, that's insane. So I have a team. So you can either SOP it, right? And then you have to have people on top of it constantly iterating on SOPs, or you can have a system, but then flexibility within the system, and then just get really freaking good people who love what they do, who are excited to grow, who you can see that growth path with. They need obviously the baseline skills. You can't hire unskilled workers in this, right? If you go the SOP route, you can hire, like, I can take them from zero, with no knowledge all the way up, right? Because you follow the system, right? My system, I can't do that. Nor do I want to do that, because I like injecting new ideas into the system. That's me. That's my comfort level. A little bit more chaotic, right? Talk to me in 5 years and be like, that's the worst way to do it ever. Go get the SOPs. But for right now, I know as a founder, that's how I've found it to work really well. I think if you were like more like checkbox kind of person, then you probably would be like, oh, I just need to make sure that I have people who can follow this, and then that's what I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a happy medium where you have some sort of system and process, but that it evolves over time, especially as new things come to market, or new ideas come up. Otherwise, as quickly as things change nowadays, then you'll end up getting left behind. But
Yeah.
what have been some of the biggest changes in the Amazon landscape from the time that you've started to today?
There's been several shifts that have happened. Um, the recent wave when I started was a lot more control over like options for like different adjustments that you can have on the campaigns, different bidding strategies, different budget strategies, things like placements and all, those kind of things. So they had a way of giving us more control. Then they had a way of giving us more data, which was really interesting. So there's a lot more things to QA, a lot more insights we can bring that would, funnel back into the advertising. And then what they are, their current wave right now is to try and take over more of that control, meaning they want the algorithm to do a little bit more of the work. Versus, a lot more like broader things, allow the algorithm to determine what kind of search terms trigger. That wave is probably the most infuriating to people like me, because we're like, I know what I want to do. I know how to make it work. Stop trying to like take control from me. But I understand why they're doing it, because they're trying to make it much more easier for entry level, right? So if you don't know what you're doing, if you allow the algorithm to take over, it's probably going to do a better job than what you're doing. If you're at the top of the game the way we are, and we know what we're doing, it actually makes things much worse. So that's the dynamic that we're trying to navigate right now. Now, if you ask the average seller, what is the biggest change, what is the most, they're going to tell you the increase in competition and the rise in the cost per clicks by far. So running more efficient, more effective advertising is becoming more and more and more difficult, just due to the costs associated with running those ads. Because back when I started, you could get like 10-cent cost per click. So if you're getting 10-cent cost per clicks, like you can have really crappy targeting. You can like barely know what you're doing. You can throw something up. If you're getting it for pennies on the dollar, the numbers can look fantastic, even if under the hood there's a bunch of stuff broken, right? Well, nowadays, if you're paying a couple bucks every click, that adds up really, really fast, and it's really, really easy to waste a lot of ad dollars quickly. Becomes a big struggle.
Well, what are the types of products that you're seeing work really well right now on Amazon?
Say home goods products tend to be a big winner. Honestly, I'm seeing a lot of things work in a lot of different categories. I think the thing that is the most important to figure out when it comes to product sourcing is there a way you can find a gap in the market, i.e. that the consumer actually cares about, would be the biggest one. Because there's a lot of people like, oh, I have this like, this brand new color that nobody else has in the market. And it's like, well, nobody else has it because they all tested it and like nobody actually wants that color, right? So it's because with it becoming more competitive, if you can, those areas are really few and far between, because there's so many people just injecting new products into the platform daily. It's kind of insane. But it's like, if you can find a place where there is shopper search that's underserved, that's probably the easiest place to play in. Like if you can have it, and that breakdown in the market could be things like maybe there's like one competitor or one main person, and they just have like a really crappy listing. They've been getting all of the market share for the longest time. They haven't had to come up against anyone. So maybe you can come up with, slightly better take on the product. It doesn't have to be revolutionary. It just has to be not the same as everybody else. Because if you're the same as everybody else and they also have a better price and reviews, like, let's be honest, as a consumer, which one am I going to click on and purchase? Like, the one that's vetted and the one that gives me a better price, right? So if you come in with, we could call like, Me Too products, it's like, oh, I'm launching this product. We're like, well, there's 6 other ones exactly like it, and you have no reviews and you wanted to launch it for $5 more. It's like, you can launch something for $5 more. It's just like, make sure the consumer understands and is okay with paying $5 more, and show them why they should pay $5 more. If you can prove that out, 100% you can make it. Just don't delude yourself.
Yeah, I think the review generation is something that is critical. But how do you go from, 0 reviews to 100, and then from 100 to 1,000, especially if there's a category where, there's products that might already have 9,000, 10,000 plus reviews?
You get a crap ton of sales. That's the legit way to do it. I mean, it used to be back in the day, you could, everyone called it, they're like, oh, it's gray hat strategy. Like, it's totally blatantly against terms of service, but everybody did it and nobody got in trouble. So like, it was quote okay, right? Amazon significantly cracked down on that. They go in waves where they're like, there's this thing and everybody does, it's totally against terms of service, which back in the day they called them like search, find, buys. It was basically, you paid somebody to simulate a legitimate purchase. So they would go in, they would search a term, they would scroll to find your product, they would click on it, and then they would then purchase it, and then leave a review afterwards. And everybody's like, oh yeah. And like, that's so blatantly manipulation of the algorithm. It's not even funny, but like, everybody did it, and that was like the way to do it. And then Amazon started like cracking down on people and like banning products, and people are getting in really big trouble. So now it's like, don't do that if you don't want your account shut down. Same thing for reviews. Like, if you're blatantly purchasing reviews and they can track that, you will get your account banned. So you have to be very, very careful. So the only way to get around that is legitimate reviews. How do you get legitimate reviews? You sell a lot of product, which is not an easy thing to hear for new sellers coming into the space.
Right.
What I will say to that is how much those reviews matter are dependent on the category. Meaning, how much distrust in your product is there? Example, huge distrust is supplements, right? You tell me this is going to get rid of my acne and it's going to make me lose 5 pounds and, my life will be better. And I'm like, I don't believe you, because I already tried 5 other things and nothing is working, right? I hope it works, but like, does it? But then if I see a bunch of people, there's 50 reviews on there that's like, oh my gosh, it totally cleared my acne and I lost 5 pounds and my boyfriend came back, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, amazing. Like, I want that product. I need it, right? So that's really important. If I am buying a kitchen spoon, I just want to make sure it doesn't break. Like, so if you give me one review that's like, hey, this thing didn't tarnish and I've been washing it for 3 months and it's amazing. Great. Okay. That's enough for me. I'm purchasing, right? So there are some categories where reviews, like no reviews is like a death sentence. And then there's other categories that like, if you at least get a couple, you can still compete. A great way to vet this actually is to go and look at search for those types of products on Amazon and then see who is organically ranked. Are there any products that are organically ranked that have just a couple reviews? If the answer is yes, there's a place for you to play in that category. If no, it's going to be a little bit tougher.
What's like one tip or trick that you would give to any, Amazon seller that's listening, that you would say, yeah, like, you definitely need to do this?
Know your numbers and don't not look at them because part of you is scared, is what I would say. I work in advertising, right? Part of my questions when I get new clients is, hey, what is you guys' profit margins, right? Because that gives me an idea, like, what wiggle room do we have to run the ads? More sellers these days know it. There's more tools out there that can help you accurately calculate your profits, but you would be surprised at how many sellers that I talk to who don't really have any idea, or like, oh, I think it was this, I tracked it like 6 months ago, right? And then when you really go in there and you dig in your look, you're like, do you know that even before ads you only have like 10% margin on this product? Like, why did you tell me my goal target is this if like that's actually going to make you lose money every single sale, right? So it's like taking a cold, hard look at your numbers and also understanding that again, I'm going to speak from an advertising perspective. It's like your expectations in advertising are going to be determined by two things, which is the competition of your market, in a lot of ways, like say the cost per clicks. And then the second one is the conversion rate of your product. So if you have much lower cost per clicks, you have really high conversion rates. Congratulations, right? Doesn't take you that many clicks to make an order. I'm not paying that much for those clicks. Sky's the limit, right? If you have really low conversion rates, i.e. also lower than your category, and you have really high cost per clicks, you have to get a ton more clicks than your competition to generate that sale, and you have to pay more every single time somebody clicks. So that's going to be much more difficult. So my job is figuring out what's the sandbox, how do we play in it, what's our best course of action, how do we navigate these problems. But in terms of like setting up those expectations, what I can expect to achieve, it is really determined by those two things.
Yeah, and I'm shocked how many businesses don't have a strong handle on that, and then
yeah,
it also puts the agency and everybody else in a bad position, because how do you know what the measure of success is, or how do you know what success looks like if you if you think a $20 CPA is good, but you really need 10 because at 20 you're losing money hand over fist due to their profit margins. All that needs to be transparent and upfront, and then have the ability to walk away as well too if it isn't working.
No, absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time today. And before we hop off, though, can you let everybody know where they can connect with you and get in contact with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So best place to connect with us if you're going to reach out in terms of if you sell on the Amazon platform, you're doing at least 7 figures a year, and you want to talk to us about potentially looking at your advertising, seeing if we think we can help with that. Best place is going to be our website. So jungler.com, JUNGLR.com. If you're just interested in Amazon advertising and you're like, this seems like an interesting place, I kind of want to learn more. Best place is going to be following me on LinkedIn. I put the most content on LinkedIn. Also our YouTube video. We're feeling more active on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, again, I really appreciate it. For everybody listening, as always, it's Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com or electricmarketing.com, and we will see you next time.